Sophisticated Silverbacks. Real conversations with real men. And Dave.
Right, everybody can hear?
Yep, I'm good.
All right, good. A little technical difficulty in the beginning. So we have a guest. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Brettle, and I go by the name Butch, and I'm a Philadelphia school teacher.
He's also my cousin. And as Lee stated earlier, we look no way related in any way, shape, or form. So we're just talking about some of your I don't know, hobby, lifestyle, and are you sponsored cyclist or?
Not a sponsored cyclist, but we are sponsored by. We have sponsors for our team. So Guys Bicycles is our primary sponsor.
Okay.
They're up on that street road. Are they still street road in Feasterville?
They sure are.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Yep.
And they've been a great sponsor for us. We have some personal sponsors, orthopeds, and other law firms.
Okay.
Yeah, it's basically like a club, and not everybody on the club races. So it's a mixture of people that just love to ride their bike.
That is cool.
For different capacities.
Okay. You might have to get a little closer to the mic because we keep fading it out.
Sure.
You can move the chair. Yeah. So now, I don't know anything about the biking world. Now you said you did some mountain biking. So do you do trail stuff? Do you do street stuff?
Yeah. So I actually transitioned over the years. I used to just mainly ride on the road and race crits and road races, which is, and right here at the Northeast Airport was a predominant training loop on Tuesday nights. Used to have a huge group show up. And back in the day, there'd be like the pros would come up when they had the Core States bike race. And that over time faded. So with all the traffic there now too, it's just more dangerous. And I just got bored with racing on the road. It's dangerous. Like you're in a crit and you're coming into a sprint and you're fighting for position and you're literally like, touching arms and you're doing like 30 miles an hour and just wearing like spandex. It's like underwear. Like you crash, it's going to really hurt, and we're not professionals. You can win some money at the races, but it's not worth the risk of getting seriously injured. So I transitioned from road racing to what's called cyclocross, which is you're basically racing on grass with obstacles. You either dismount off your bike and run over a couple of barriers, or if it's a real steep hill, that dismount and you carry your bike. And it's a real short course, and it's like a 45-minute like all-out effort. And it involves more bike skills, which was more fun. And from there, I got into mountain biking, which I absolutely love. Just being with nature and on those single tracks, you're using more skills. And one of the reasons why I really love it is it keeps me in the present moment. Like I have to keep being very present, looking like 15 feet, 10 feet ahead of me, because the trail's always going to move. On the road, your mind can drift all the time. There's just no stimuli to keep you focused. So mountain biking, I was out this morning down in Pennypack, and it's peaceful. Like you can train hard or you can just dial it back and just be there. And, that's the way it was this morning. Just decided to make it like a contemplative ride. Looking forward to coming here and talking to you guys and just starting my day off that way.
How many events a year do you compete in?
I usually do about 10 races a year.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's actually on the lower end for people who are like really committed to the race season.
So how long does it take you to prepare for an event?
So I train all year round.
Mm-hmm.
And so my training blocks might be about, so my race season ends in like December. So I've been dialed it way down, and that's my coach had me ramping it back up. So my next race is in like 2 weeks, first mountain bike race. So it's I guess they're like 6 week, 8 week blocks of training
So how many sessions are in the weight room when you're training for a block like that?
Yeah, so I haven't been in the weight room, you know, I'll be honest, and I'm here to tell on myself right now. So there's been no real weight training, strength training for this. It's just been all on the bike. I'll do core, you know, stuff like that.
Sure.
Part of it, you know, was when getting my knee rehabbed. You know, I
Okay.
couldn't really do squat down too low. So this conversation is really good for me to hold myself accountable, to get
Okay.
back into doing some strength training. And I love doing like isolated leg stuff, you know. And I realized, you know, it's interesting when we get injured. It's to me, it's very humbling because I went to my my physical therapist and she had me try to do this one exercise where you're doing a bridge on your back and you kick your one leg up, and I couldn't do it. I'm like, holy shit! Like my glutes were that weak because I was trying to engage my hamstrings, right? So what I'm learning about my body is the areas I need to strengthen because I don't even have the muscle to engage that, the power to engage that muscle in isolation. So to me, that was like, oh, that was a good moment. And it was, and I told her, I said, like, after that session, I'm like, thanks for the humble pie because I got some work to do.
Yeah.
You know, because I don't, you know, with cycling, you can get over on using like your quads and your thighs to power the pedals, but your glutes, you know, are just as efficient and a good muscle strength source when you're pushing on the pedals.
How do we handle injuries, Bill?
We usually just train through them, to be honest with you. Like, I tore my bicep about 1.5 years ago, and the next day I was training. And in about a month, I was doing upper body again. Now, I mean, we augment it, but I'm going to agree with you on the mindfulness. I guess everybody has their thing. Like, I mean, Lee can tell you, when I first started lifting, it would be like, are you okay? Are you okay? Because it's the only time that my mind is completely quiet.
Yeah, he goes into it like a trance.
Yeah,
Like,
and
yeah,
and it made him nervous at first because like Lee's like the Incredible Hulk when he starts. He's like a berserker. Like he's getting ready for it. I just calm down completely.
Yeah.
And it's just two different. We're both in that moment. It's just two different ways of doing it. And it's the only time that like I mean with PTSD, anxiety, whatever they want to call that I have, it's the only time that there should probably be a risk assessment the weights we're doing, but there's not. Like, it's just complete silence in my mind. There's not a calculation of risk and safety and like there is with every other aspect of my life. And it just, I mean, I've come in here full of rage and then Lee will just look at me like, okay, so are we lifting today or what? Like, that's all he says, and I lift and I'm fine. He's like, how do you feel now? Better. It kind of pulls me back, centers me, humbles me. I'm feeling like whatever muscle we're working at that moment. I'm concentrating on that, and then I feel a hell of a lot better. And that's kind of why we started our foundation for vets, because I was on 26 different meds in 15 years. They all ended the same way: suicidal, mania, paranoia. They kept saying it's whatever this is, your PTSD, your anxiety. But it was really just the meds exacerbating, and he was the only one that would accept me at 500 pounds, with barely able to come across the parking lot.
Yeah, three other gyms turned him away.
Really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
as a liability. Yeah, like one of them was my friend who helped me get in shape to get in the service, and he either wanted a ton of money from me, which I couldn't afford. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or he was just like, well, that's it. You know what I mean? I can't train you unless you pay this amount, and I couldn't afford it. I was back in school, and being a vet, Lee worked something out with me, and then after coming in and feeling better, and then being in this environment, because again, with Lee, Exalted, and the other guys that we lived with, it's the closest that I can get to the military because we're doing dangerous shit, and we have to rely on each other, and we're pushing through hard stuff, and that builds bonds. And I'm sure with your bike team, you kind of get that bond that you have with your other friends as well.
Yeah. There is that. I never thought about it in that depth. So there are some really good bonds that take place on a team, and also it's some guys their level of their reason for racing and competing is different than mine. Like if they're always like for me, when I show up at an event, like there's a mental thing I go through. Like when my self-talk is like, I'm just here to throw down the best that I can and compare myself to myself. Because if I start comparing myself to somebody who is up there, like, you know, up the road, and I can't get them, like, I still got to come back, like, okay, just I'm grateful my body can push this hard. And I literally say that. Like, I thank my body for being able to push this hard. And if I can't get that person up there, it's like, okay, maybe they're feeling better today than I am. You know, because we never know how we're going to feel every morning, right? Like rest, I'm big on rest, right? I have a very good regimented sleep program and hydration and all the basics. But, you know, comparing myself to myself, I found it's my best competitor. Like, they're all just like parts of the game. All my competitors, they're parts of the game. You know?
You married? Do you have kids?
I'm not married. I was married, but I do
Okay.
have kids. Yeah.
All right. How old are your kids?
They're 22. I have triplets.
Okay. Were you competing when your kids were young?
So I came into their life when they were like 10. They're my
Okay.
stepchildren. So yes, I was still competing, but not as much.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did that affect your sleep, your nutrition, your training, all that?
Oh yeah, it was very different.
It's very different, very
Yeah.
difficult when you got kids,
Yeah,
right? To
absolutely.
get everything right.
100%. 100%. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that was probably the hardest transition for me, going from like strongman and football and all that stuff to powerlifting, because you're really just competing against yourself in powerlifting. And it took Lee a while, because there's people I absolutely love. In my mind, that mindset of like the other sports that I played, I was like, F that guy, I'm going to destroy him. And Lee's like, it's not like that.
Right.
And then when I went to my first meet, you realize how much everybody helps each other out. And like everybody wants to set that record, but they're happy when somebody else they know put in the work and sets a record. And it was almost like a cleansing experience, to be honest with you, just to be able to go in and be like, wow, like here's these group of people. We're all here for the same reason. We're all competing against each other.
Yeah.
But we all love the fact when somebody else gets that record or beats themselves, or you know what I mean? Like I cannot wait till Tim puts up that K.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like my
Yeah.
buddy Tim is coming close to benching a K, and what's cool, like I almost like kind of look up to him because he has the same look on his face. Like when he's
Yeah.
benching, it's very stoic, very like quiet. It's not rage filled. And he goes up, and if he doesn't make it, it's like, oh, okay, you know what I mean? It is, and he gets back in his mindset. And you'll realize that there's a lot of help that you get from a lot of other people. And it's really just truly competing against yourself.
I look at every meet as a learning experience, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. It's a learning experience. I take something away from every event that I've competed in to help me prepare for the next one.
Yeah, I mean, Lee saw the PTSD rage in one meet because they set my safety pins wrong, and it was a weight that like I can, you know what I mean, that I could was easy. Like we built up, like our last weight's something that we never had in our hands. That like that's kind of like our rule, I guess. That's not everybody's, but that's ours. So we're building up to it. So this weight I had in my hand, and when I came down, I hit the pin on the one side because it was too high for me, and it just threw off my whole lift. And they didn't realize it at first. And then they said, okay, we can go again. I'm like, I can't go right now. I just gassed myself trying to pin press this. And they said, okay, we can go with 3 lifters. You know, usually you get a cycle of like, what, 10, 15 lifters, depending on how many people are
Eight
there.
to 10, yeah.
How much time is that about?
Well, probably about 2 to 3 minutes per lifter, probably between loading the bar, getting the lift in, and then, getting the next lifter. Yeah, probably about 2 to 3 minutes per
So you
lifter.
get like normally like a 20 to 30 minute
Yeah.
recovery period?
Yeah, because I mean, you're putting up stuff that, we have our heavy day on Sundays, but it's not something we do every day.
Sure.
And that's what's good about having a trainer, and that's also what brought me here. Dave, who's in our theme, but barely ever here.
1.5 for 7.
He's the one that introduced us, and I kind of told him, like, I don't know my body. Like, I used to do strongman stuff. I used to, if I need to put 20 pounds on, I knew what to do. If I needed to drop 20 pounds, I knew what to do. And it just, with all the medications and everything that was going on, and the way my body changed from being 230 and 8% body fat to, like, chewed bubblegum at 500, I needed guidance, and that's really where trainer comes in. I mean, and you don't want – and Lee is not like a meathead trainer. He's about 20 years in a hospital, has a master's degree, has dedicated his life to this, can train you in anything.
I was 17 years the lead exercise physiologist at Holy.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so
Wow.
that's what I did before I started doing this full time. I mean, this was a part-time business. I was training kids for sports, and then when COVID hit, I transitioned into full-time personal training.
Wow. Yeah, I have a whole new level of respect for like physical therapy and people in that field because of how they know the body.
Yeah.
You know, like when I'm walking after I do my little session with Danielle, who's my PT, like she watches how I walk. You know, and like my foot pronates then out, you know, and my knees like coming, like, so it's, I have, you know, like I said, a high respect for folks in that industry. Yeah, they're godsends. They're body shops, you know, like we get beat up, right, which is part of life.
And a lot of that's experience. I mean, for the physiologist or for the physical therapist or you know, nurse, you know, it's experience in seeing something that she's already seen before or has treated before. Because as much as we learn about the body in the books, in the course of our education, there's no replacement for experience because everybody that you treat is different. You know, you might have an ACL injury, but your ACL injury and your recovery from it will differ from another individual who's going through the same thing.
Yeah.
And you also teach too, right?
Yeah, so I've been teaching in Philly for, I think, close to 30 years now. And I went through the Philadelphia public school systems. I grew up in Alny, went to Alny High. And, you know, the story behind me getting into teaching, it wasn't my first pursuit for a career. I went to college for fashion merchandising because I was like big into clothing. I loved clothing and things like that. And when I came out of there, I had a little job. I was working in Alny. There's like a men's boutique specialty store that custom made suits and all that stuff. And I would go to New York and do those buying shows. And, you know, it just wasn't fulfilling. You know, it was all like surface level stuff for me, you know. I bounced around for a while and, you know, I built houses for a while. I was a bike messenger for a while. You know, I worked in the pharmaceutical and as a temp at McNeil Pharmaceutical, like in packaging and stuff. So bounced around a lot. And then while I was at McNeil, my elementary school, Morrison, called me for career day. So here I was in my 20s. And I'm trying to make what I did look kind of like cool and stuff to like 4th and 5th graders. Like, yeah, you know, when these pills, you know, take out all the bad pills. And one kid asked me, he's like, so why does medicine taste so bad? And that's a great question. Before I could answer, another kid said, my dad tells me it's so we don't take too much of it. Like, boom, light bulb moment. I'll never forget it. Like, that's what changed me to make that pivot into getting into teaching. That moment right there. Because I had degrees, all I had to do is like do my background checks and get it. I could start subbing. So my gateway into teaching was I became a sub, was doing long-term substitute teaching. I went back to Temple, got a master's degree in education, and then started teaching. And I've only taught middle school. Like middle school is the area where there's no gray area. You either love it or you don't, because it's a hard age, right? So, you know. I taught I started teaching, my first school was Roosevelt Middle School down in Germantown, and that's baptism by fire. Like, that was a tough school. And I stayed there for like 8 years, and I knew inside, like, my spirit was just like starting to like dissolve. Like, the cup was empty for too long. So I said, I got to make a change. And then there's a brand new school that got built called Grover Washington in Alny, my old neighborhood. So that started off being like a year-round public school. So I went there and taught there for like, I don't know, 10 years and like getting ready for another change. And then a friend of mine told me about a math position, because I've always taught math basically for most of my career, about up here at Hancock, you know, John Hancock Demonstration School. So I applied there and I've been there ever since. So yeah, and so teaching is what I'm a person who, when I know I got to change, like, I change. And I just listen to my intuition. So about 3 years ago, I could feel myself, I've been teaching math, and not that the curriculum in Philly, it's got rigor. It's a solid curriculum. Like, I'd led like school district-wide professional developments for the math program here in the city on these Zoom meetings during, you know, the pandemic with like a bunch of people on a Zoom, like 70 or 100 people, teachers in there, and because I wanted to challenge, you know, it was something new. So, but I can feel myself like losing interest. And if I'm bored, my students are going to be bored. Like there's no hiding it, right? If you don't have a passion or some kind of spark with what you do, people can pick up on it. So about 2 years ago, one of my colleagues said, you know, the Mayfair School, there's this teacher down there, the middle school there, he's doing a CTE program, which is Career Technology and Education. So he's teaching kids how to use drills and all the, you know, for the building trades. I'm like, yeah. So my colleague and I went down there, and Evan Jarrett is his name, and he's crushing it. Like he's what we need for the building trades.
I just saw an article on it.
Yeah, he's always, you know, he's spoken at the national building CTE conventions and things. Great guy, and I call him my mentor. I don't know if he'll accept that title, but so I go to his class. We go to his classroom, and we go on a podcast, and we're talking a little bit. Student-driven podcast. So, and then the 4th grade class comes in, and I had this 4th grade girl teaching me how to sweat copper pipe with a blowtorch. 4th grade.
That's awesome.
Right? And I'm like, so she's like, you know, yay tall, right? And so I've never done it before, but I love using my hands. So I'm doing it, you know, and she's looking at it and checking out my work. She's, oh, you got to do a little bit right here, you know. And we were making like these sweating L brackets. And I'm looking at my watch, and we had to go back to my school pretty soon. And I told my colleague, and I said, oh, look, I said, you know, thank you so much to the girl. I said, thank you so much for your help and for teaching me. And she looks at me very seriously, and she's like, what are you talking about? You're not done. Right? I'm like, I said, I wish I could finish. But she was like, she was a great teacher. Right? And so that moment was another hard pivot for me. I went back. I was lit up. I was lit up from that experience. And I said, this is where I want to go. And so the drive back to school with my colleague, we were talking, and I found out that that young girl, and she said, my colleague said, you see me talk to Mr. Jarrett? And he's like, yeah, what did you guys talk about? And she goes, that girl really can't read. So here you have a child who has enough confidence to use tools and learn this skill, and she's struggling with reading, right? And that's not uncommon, right? So without these opportunities for kids to use their hands, to build their confidence, right? Students can just feel like, what's the point? You know, at least that's my opinion. So here's how things work out when I know I'm going to listen to my intuition and put it into work. That summer, and I kept telling my administration, like, we got to do some kind of program like this, right? So that summer, the week before we went back to school, my principal calls me up and is like, hey, listen, the computer teacher just left and went to another district. Do you want to do the computer class and do like a STEM program? I'm like, STEM is good, but what he has there, Jared has his class, like that's better. That's where we got to go. So they're like, okay, we talked it over. I said, this is what I've already done. This is why we should do it. And I mapped it all out because I gave it some thought because it was really just pulling on me to put it all out on paper so I could see it more clear. And they're like, okay, let's just figure this out together because there's no funding, right? There's no funding for this. So, and I had Karen Messina, who was from the electricians union, like come and help me out and, help me. So it requires me to get help from outside the district. So this is the second year doing the program, and now I have kids learning how to use power tools and things like that. Last year we did electrical work because it's a low risk type thing. And I also had to teach 30 kids at a time, and I kept saying to my administration, like, for safety reasons, to make this program grow, we got to cut it down. I can't watch 30 kids when they have tools. And they did. They made it happen, like big.
So what they cut it down to? What's the number?
It's like 15. It's half, right?
Perfect.
It is perfect.
Yep.
So it's just been a great ride, and the kids love it, and it is what I think the essence of what this class is helping kids do is it's empowering them, It's empowering them to, like, when they build something with their hands and their tool, with using tools or something, or they wire a receptacle and they plug it in, it works. Like, you should see their face. Like, oh my God, I did this, And I also worked, connected with, I took them over to the Finishing Trades Institute right around the corner, where they do drywall, the glaziers are there, and like, they did all this stuff, and it's just the building trades, their work population is aging out, and there's going to be a huge demand for to replenish the workforce, and that's why, to me, it's a greater purpose than just teaching. This is just not. I think my shifting went from having a career to a calling when I did this, and it's just, you guys can probably feel my energy already when I talk about this, and it's just a gift. Like,
so where do these kids go from? So they go. Your school goes to what grade?
So we go to 8th grade.
You go to 8th grade, and then where do they go to the high school when they graduate your school?
So they get to choose different high schools. Some kids will go to the academic group and go to Central. Some kids will go to Rush, right, for the creative part. Some kids will go to Swenson. So they kind of go. Some kids will go to like the charter school, or it's called Town Park.
Franklin Town?
Franklin Town, yeah.
Okay.
So they kind of spread out. And some kids go to Northeast, yeah.
It's weird as a culture that we traded stuff that we do with our hands for books. And there's some value in books, but I think that creating and building, and like you said, is more, at least for me, is more fulfilling. Everybody I grew up with in our family worked with their hands and hard workers, but they kept pushing books. So I went to college where I probably would have rather swung a hammer and learned to trade and stuff like that.
So you could have built that block, all that
way,
sweat I put
way
in?
better than you, yeah. I mean, the thing's a little bit. You got to see that thing. That thing's a nightmare, but it holds me. So,
Like a failed 6th grade carpentry project.
no measurement whatsoever. He was eyeballing the whole thing. But yeah, I mean, I think there's so much value in that when you have an end product where you don't see the end product of the books until you graduate. So it's a prolonged, and it's not graduating. Having a degree is not what it was in 2004. You know what I mean? That now college seems, and I just went back, it is like another level of high school. You have kids that don't want to be there, that will probably be really good at pipe fitting.
Well, and it had
Carpentry.
long-reaching health. It had long-reaching health ramifications too, because we went from being an industrialized society to being a service-oriented society. So we were on our feet, we were physically working. Now we're sitting behind desks in front of a computer all day, and it greatly contributed to the epidemic of obesity in America.
Well, my favorite part of the military is being out in the field, coming home dirty and tired, whether it's pulling an antenna out of the ground, with a crane, you know what I mean, and doing the maintenance on that, or just being out in the field with your friends, and it's a different, like, you got to put at least a polo shirt on if you're going into an office. You got to put khakis on, and you got to change your whole personality. Most people that don't talk like that. Like, they talk like we do in the gym, and then you got to be fake for 8 hours of the day, and unless you are friends with some of the people. But then it's almost like in quiet. Like
that was rough for me. I mean, I went from working. I got educated late. I went to school at 31 years old. I was a true freshman in college. So I was working in a steel factory. I decided to go to school. So,
wow.
Yeah, I made the decision to go to school, and the difference between two guys in a factory will exchange FUs, and then 5 minutes later be drinking a can of Coke and laughing over it. Where you're professional now and working in a hospital, and you've got a beef, but you got to hold all that in because you're a professional now. Like, you can't really tell somebody what you really think, and then and then move on, and you never quite get over it, So
even not a beef, just joking with each other, like you know what I mean, to alleviate stress in a stressful situation, like inappropriate humor. I don't know about everybody else, but it's funny as hell with me. You know what I mean? And maybe that's the military part of me. I don't know, but it's different. And I know my audience. Like, if I was a teacher, obviously I'm not going to play that. But like, if I stub my toe, you know what I mean? Why do I got to hold back and say fudge or something like that? Because I'm around a bunch of people I work with. My normal reaction is drop the F-bomb and then move on.
That steel factory was like a massive men's locker room.
Yeah.
You know, those guys would all lay down in traffic for each other working there. I mean, it was just an awesome, awesome environment.
Yeah, you know what's different about my friend Evan's class down in Mayfair? Like, they curse in his class, and he's okay with it, and he'll curse a little bit too, and he's up front, like, yep, he'll curse, and he went like he videotapes, he puts their stuff on YouTube, like he'll say like you're about to hear some curse words, and you hear this young girl going f this, f that, you know, he just accepts it, like, and that's the culture of his. Like his is like that real shop, you know. He's got his is much different than mine right now because he's been there for like 6 years. He's had, you know, plus he's great at reaching out, and his networking is really strong. Yeah, it is about the culture of the place we work in, and for my classroom now, the culture I have is like I play music, and sometimes I play it loud because I learned that from Evan. Like I couldn't. Here's the advice he gave me. He came from he was a carpenter and then went into teaching. He's like, I just do the opposite of what the other teachers were doing. That's what he tells me from the start. He goes, when I started making this transition, he's like, do the opposite of what the other teachers are doing. I'm like, huh. So I started doing it, and like, not 100%, you know, because I had all these years of experience and I know what kind of works and what doesn't. And like, I had to let go of some of my old ways, you know. But playing music for kids when they're doing it, and like, this lightens the room up where. And when I say lightens, I mean, what happens in our like neurological sense, like our brains open up and that creativity space is there. You know, it's not like trying to crunch numbers on a paper or write an essay. It's just, here's what I found. So we built some birdhouses, right? First little hands-on project, teach them how to use a miter saw and the drills. So when they make a mistake, they don't go like, oh, damn, I'm not doing this shit no more. They go, oh, I got to fix it, right? So the mistakes don't feel as heavy. And like, that's a life skill, right? When we make a mistake, how do we come back from that? Are we gonna like, you know, beat ourselves up internally with the inner critic? Or are we gonna be like, oh, okay, well, let me try something different, you know?
Well, there's that physicality to it too. They have something in their hands. Like when you're sitting here trying to figure out trig, that most of us will never use again. And I agree, you should be exposed to it at some level just to see if that's the direction you want to go in.
Right.
But if you don't, it's a lot of pressure on somebody. There's nothing physically there. And then when you get it right, okay, great.
Yeah.
How do I write a check? How do I balance a checkbook? Like stuff that I'm going to definitely use in life. And what you're teaching them is like, even if they never become a carpenter, they'll know how to measure twice, cut once. You know what I mean? They'll know how to hang a shelf in their house when they need it. You know, door frame breaks, whatever it is. They know how to do that stuff. And that's it's physical. It's in their hand. They can see what they're doing. They can see what they're doing wrong. They can see the better way to correct it. Where the other stuff, everything else seems like we're learning the language from books. You know what I mean? And languages aren't easy for everyone.
Right.
And especially the older you get. So I don't know where the right balance of exposing kids to that, maybe that higher form of math that most of us will never use. And some of them will go down that direction because they absolutely get it and love it. So you want to expose them to it. But at the same time, where does life skills fit in? Like we seem to trickle off more and more life skills and more physical things in school for more and more book learning. And I know a ton of people with a driver's license that don't know how to drive for shit.
Dude,
like
if I sent Sam downstairs for a set of vice grips with all those tools, he'd have no idea.
Yeah. Well, he's an officer,
but my kid can do higher level calculus.
Yeah.
Like,
and
you know?
everybody's got their intelligence.
And we all need people like that,
Yeah.
right? Like people got to find their place. And
Well, I mean, when I was a kid, I mean, our parents raised us different. Like I had to watch my dad repair a toilet.
Same here.
And like I had to hold the tools for him and hand him the tools when he needed it. And then, you know, when I became a homeowner, toilet broke, I knew what to do. I knew how to replace an electric fixture or, you know, saw a box together.
Well, that was the entirety of my family, like I said. And most of and I don't know where I guess because at one point in time, like college and book learning were a way to a better life. But the people I respected, like my dad worked his ass off with his hands, you know what I mean? My grandfather worked his ass off with his hands. Uncle Ray, you know, like all these people were just, and the people that had a trade, that had a skilled trade seemed generally happier at the end of the day. They'd come home, they'd have their dinner, they'd sit with their family. And I'm not saying that, like, again, like book learning is great, but the physical representation of what you're doing is so much more satisfying to learn with your hands on The one thing I did like about radio school when I was in the service is going through the circuit boards, doing the test, running that, pulling antennas out, raising antennas, doing the maintenance on all that stuff. That's the stuff that I liked. It was just sitting in the office, answering the phone, like, did you try turning it on or off and on again? Like, that drove me nuts.
Right.
We lost that. And now those are the jobs, like you said, there's plenty of job opportunities out there. There's way more better to make money.
Yeah. And so look, when I was growing up, there was that big push in school to go to college. I was the first person in my family to ever go to college. And that came from a nudge from a neighbor, not my parents. My dad wanted me to get into the trades. My mom's like, do what you want to do. My dad's like, because my dad was in the trades. My brother got into the trades. And I was like, I think I want to do college, because all my friends, most of them are going to go to college. So I think now, the times are different now than when I went to school. First of all, college is so fucking expensive, right? It's insane. And to come out of college and have like $70,000 worth of debt is just ludicrous. So with the building trades, you get paid as you go through your apprenticeship and come out with a job. So you're still able to, one, support yourself financially without going into debt. And the other thing I learned through, this isn't an original thought, but with conversations with other people, you can farm out the desk behind a job, right? They can go overseas. You can't farm out the electricians and the plumbers. That's a job that can't be farmed out overseas. We need those skilled labor workers here. So it's like, okay, so there's job security right there. So it just makes a lot of sense that, to support something that, on a number of fronts, right? Empower kids, young kids, to learn and build things with their hands, especially in middle school, because we're like the second middle school in the city to be doing this. And another reason why I do this is because I want kids to pick the best high school that's a fit for them. Like, if you never know you worked with your hands, and you don't know if you like it or not, I had kids already now tell me, like, Mr. Brettle, with your class, I will now go to Swenson. And gender, it doesn't matter. And the girls in my class, they crush it. Like, they are legit. They're better than they're better than the boys. I'm going to put it out there right now.
They say that with shooting too, because they pay attention more.
They're more focused.
Yeah.
They're more mature at the same age.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I see that training athletes. I see that too.
Yeah.
With student athletes, the girls are more mature at the given age. It takes the boys till probably around junior, senior year of high school to catch up.
I agree
with mature in regards to maturity. Yeah.
And I have some people that are organizations trying to get more women into the building trades labor force, and 100% they.
Yeah, I mean, my original degree was psychology, and I went to a school that was Holy Family, very heavy at the time, very heavy education, very heavy psychology. So they kind of married the program. So it was pretty much a developmental psychology, is what it was. And there's one thing that kind of stuck with me. I say stuff like dumbass or something like that, but like for the most part, nobody's really dumb. They have a skill set that they're probably phenomenal at. It's just that the standardized education that we have now, that the mainstream education is missing those. Like my buddy Bry is one of my best friends growing up. He was a problem child, mathematical genius. Like he was tutoring me when in college. He never went to college. He's like, come on, man. And he would explain it to you. Come on, motherfucker. Look at this shit right here. Look at this shit right here. This is what you do. But he's great at electronics. He goes around the country, running wire and doing stuff for Walmart and all these big companies and cables and cameras and clothes. That's his thing. You know what I mean? And he enjoys it. He gets in his zone. But they miss that completely.
I think it's fair to say that with the advent of standardized tests as a measuring stick for kids to move on to the next level of education, that kids have learned how to regurgitate what they learn to the test. Kids have, or we have forgotten, or society's forgotten, or we don't teach the kids how to learn anymore. We're giving
Yeah.
them everything that they need to know, versus them trying to figure it out on them.
It's what
you know,
to think
on their
and not
own.
how to think.
Yeah, they forgot how to think.
Yeah.
Yep.
I agree 100%. And I also believe that for the most part, we're still teaching in a factory model. You know, like information in, information out, like you were just saying. And so as a teacher, when I was teaching math, what used to really test my patience is like, I don't get it, right? They get the question like, I don't understand this. I'm like, so what did you try so far? Nothing, you know, or I'm like, so it would just be the lack of critical thinking it's just that, it's a lack. And as opposed to if you give them the freedom to say, well, how would you start the problem? Because you can start a problem in a number of different ways, you know? And I've learned that it's all about effort and trying your best and looking at it and then having the willingness to go back and say, okay, where did I think I made a mistake? And that's the same thing now with what I have the kids do in my class. So they'll come to me, and I made it part of my teaching practice where they'll come to me and the board split when they're trying to put the screw in. It's like, Mr. Brettle, the board split. I'm like, okay, what are you going to do? I'm not going to give you a solution. Like, that's your problem. I don't say it like that. But you know what? I will say that. I'll joke around and be like, that's your birdhouse. You know? What are you going to do about it? Like, well, I want to put a new board on there. Well, let's get a new board. Get a new board and cut it. Like, you don't need to tell me. Like, just fix it. You know what to do. You know? And I think that's the difference I see with my class now as opposed to when I was teaching math specifically. The amount of questions I need to ask my students to prompt them every time they would, you know, go off course with trying to solve a problem, that's really draining. Like, because then I had like 30 kids in the class, and 50% of them needed extra help at least, you know. The other thing that I love about the class I'm doing now is kids help each other organically. Like, they want to help. You know, when someone finished their project earlier, be like, all right, can you go supervise that team over there because they're struggling? And I'm like, what supervise means is you show them and then you undo it and then they need to do it. Don't stand there and do it for them. Like, you now just became my teaching assistant. Like, really? I'm like, yeah, you got it. You show me. And that's the kind of culture I'm trying to create in my classroom where I'm not the only teacher here. You can all learn from each other. I'm just the guide I want to be the guide on the side who's playing the music that, you know what I mean? Be the DJ in the room.
Yeah.
But no, it's hard. Education is, there's a lot of changes that can be made. Part of it, look, the funding for education in our country it's not good, right? And especially now. And that's why we're not ranked really high, you know, in certain areas compared to other countries. And look, we're a big nation, right? So it's a complicated situation. And from grassroots as a teacher, it's like, what do I have control over? You know, control the controllables type attitude is what I have. And, you know, because then you get in a whole mix of like the baggage kids bring into school, right? They don't know how to leave their bags outside the school and just focus on their work at school, right? We got adults that can't even. So, yeah, it's
Well, everybody develops differently too. I mean,
Sure.
there's some things that are the same. You know what I mean? Across the board, you know, pretty standardized developmental. You know, like 5th, 6th grade, they start to learn that like I can lie. You know what I mean? I could tell a fib and the adult doesn't know. You know what I mean? So that causes a bunch of problems. And my wife, first year teacher, is kind of learning that as well. But there's also people develop different directions. So how do you capture that? Again, it's a how to think thing and an exposure thing. You know what I mean? Like, in a certain way, you have to have stuff that's set in stone to actually teach somebody. But what if somebody's not good at trig? You know what I mean? But they're a fantastic electrician.
Yeah.
Well, how do you expose them to one and kind of transition them over to the other one? Because obviously that's what they're better at. That's what they enjoy doing. Without funding and things like that, to be able to give them that, Like, what's the format? And I don't think I often think about it, actually. For some reason in my head, I'm always thinking about teaching, especially since I did it in the DOD with people getting out and stuff like that. Like, how would I do it? When my daughter goes through something, how would I have done it? But, like, how do you capture everybody?
I taught high school. I taught private school at a Hebrew high school. I taught boys gym 4 years. I was culture shock.
Very, very much looked like a gym teacher. Had the same bright attitude.
I was culture shock for those boys. So every year, the very start of the year, I'd have them run. I used to call it the Green Mile because they'd get sick. I had them run the mile, and we clocked it. So I'd have them run the mile, and half of them would be puking all over the lawn, puking all over the lawn. But at the start of every gym class, I made them run. So they had to run like a 16th of a mile to start, because it was the class, the first year I taught it was at the J. So I had a kid that was an adult, and we were getting up to running the mile, and the mile was 16 laps. So my deal was, if you gave an effort and you ran the prescribed amount, because everybody can't be good at gym, which I was okay with, but everybody can give an effort. So I'd have them run, say, 8 laps. You know, we build up to 8. We're at a half mile. You gave the effort. When your 8 was done, you sat down and waited until the rest of the class finished. So him and another kid were clowning around, and I said, again, like now I got the entire class is sitting. I got 2 kids left running. Again, you're going to go until you give me an effort. By the 10th lap, one of the 2 kids figured out, all right, I got to give an effort because I'm getting tired. I want to sit down. By the 15th lap, now he's clowning around for the whole class, and they're laughing at him. And I'm like, all right, again, we can run until class is over. I don't care. You're not hurting me. 15th lap, he stopped. He looked at me and he said, "You run the fucking lap." And I went, "Have a seat." So I let the rest of the class go play. I said, "You got an F for running close to a mile. You ran close to a mile to get an F." I was probably the only adult who ever said no to him. And he responded to that. Yeah. He responded to that discipline. It kind of changed things a little bit for him, because I stood up to him and said, "No, you're not doing this here." And at the end of the year, I would show them the difference in their mile times. I tested them in the mile. I tested them in push-ups. I tested them in a few things because there was no standard for them. It was a private school. So, I wanted them to have some kind of level of athleticism at the end of the year. And I would also make them write papers I'd give them different, because it was health and phys ed. Yeah. So I'd give them paper topics, like the importance of washing your hands and stuff like that. Make them write like a 2 or 3 page paper on something like that, social issues, whatnot. I know a pretty decent amount of them as adults now, and they are successful. I mean, a decent number of them went to serve in the IDF and serve in the American services. Almost all of those boys went on to serve, which I'm rather proud of.
So, Bill, your question was, like, how do you get them to buy in? Is that what?
Well, I mean, not necessarily, like, because I could always get everybody to buy in when I taught, because I would start out with something slightly inappropriate.
Right.
And that would kind of grasp their attention. But it would always be associated with whatever I was going to teach, right? So now I already got it. And it would be like a free speech kind of area. Like, we all bought in that, like, if you drop an F-bomb, nobody's going to go crying. You know what I mean? Like, crying anywhere like that. It is what it is. But ask your questions. I don't care. You know what I mean? Stop me, I mean, if I can't stop right at that second because I got to get it out, I'll go, all right, give me a second, boom, and then right back to you. I guess the issue is, how do you, just knowing, like my buddy Bry, right? Like, he was just left by the wayside, a problem child. He's not a problem child. They just weren't, he was so smart at math. But, like, you know what I mean? And he cared little about, like, everything else. Like, how do you capture him? Because he's pretty successful now. But he's being called a dumbass by the entirety of the school system growing up. You know what I mean? Like, so, and that's always, like, the thing that I come back to. Like, how do you capture people's strengths? You know what I mean? Shore up their weaknesses, obviously. I mean, you don't want them to abandon something they're not good at. You want to teach them how to persevere and get through it. But also reinforce what they enjoy doing. that they're better at. It's not always
It only
English,
takes
math,
it
and
only
history.
takes one person, for a kid to connect with a kid, to let that kid know that, I believe in you.
Yeah.
I believe in your ability. I believe in you. Like, he's connecting with kids on a level and giving them something to believe in and building their confidence that may carry over to their academics.
Yeah.
I can do this with a drill. I can do this with a saw. I can do this with a screwdriver, whatever. And that may give them the confidence to do the math or to do the English or whatever it is. I mean, when I went to school, we're about the same age. There was no ADHD. They just put you in learning disabled.
Right.
So I was
That's right.
in learning disabled classes. They
Makes
just,
sense.
yeah, I mean, they just thought I was stupid. Yeah, I was just dumb. I wasn't smart enough to go. I was an anomaly because I had AP English, but I had remedial math. I was doing long addition in high school. I couldn't do math and I couldn't do sciences. I just didn't have the focus for it until I was an adult. But I just needed that one person to look at me and go, yeah, you can do that. Yeah, you're smart.
I'm
Yeah,
glad
you
I
can
could
do
be
that.
that for you.
Yeah.
It was Andrea, buddy.
No, but to Lee's point, for the kids who kind of square peg round hole, is one, as a teacher and as a person, it's I've learned to pay attention, literal attention to when I stand in the hallways when kids in the mornings. I look at kids' faces and I'm like, okay, that kid's got his hood up and his head's way down right now. And I make sure I say, because I teach every kid in the school. I teach 300 kids, right? And I make sure I say their name so I see you. That's my point. Hey, what's up? You good? And sometimes that little bit helps, and sometimes they need more than that. But it's an intention for me when I start my day in the hallway, to say hi to kids. So what I'm trying to do is build relationships with these kids. And I'm in a great position because I do see every kid in the building. And I have smaller class sizes than my colleagues where, I do have, if I can have space to talk to them. And what's happening organically in my class is because the vibe is much different. It's open space, and kids love being in classrooms where there's less kids. And my classrooms, my shop's pretty big, right? So there's literally physical open space in my room, and they're not sitting close together. So I think that taps into their parasympathetic system where they're not in fight and flight. They can dial it down a little bit and okay, now I take a breath. I'm here. I can do my work. And what's happened in my classroom is I started giving kids nicknames, just out of nowhere. I have one of my students, Kayla, who's really good, and I had her teach an adult how to use a drill and stuff because that's my goal too. When people come to my classroom, have the kids teach them, like that 4th grade girl taught me, right? I said, can I call you CP? Because that's her initial. She's like, yeah, okay. So that's happened over and over, and that's developing a relationship with that student, and it's makes them unique. It's also saying I see you, right? Because we can hide in a group of people, right? And if teaching math where I had 30 kids in a class, kids could hide. The kids who, never raised their hands, they could go through a whole year and I wouldn't really be able to spend too much time with them. So, yeah, I think the relationship building to that point and having the awareness of looking at students as they, pass on by and see what's going on. And it's, the kids in school that get the most attention are the real loud ones, right? Walking down the hall, raising hell and cursing up a storm and shit like that. But I realize it's the quiet kids I'm concerned about now, because they're the ones who are maybe be in just the same amount of pain as the ones that are just very vocal. They're just shoving it down. So, yeah, it's I think the essence for me, my approach to life and people is people matter to me. And I say that wholeheartedly. I feel that in here. And that's something that when I worked on myself like a year ago, I went, did some hard work on my inside, did some inside work. People matter. And so when I'm out in going to Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts to get something to eat or drink, I make it, this to me is not transactional. It's like, hey, how's it going? How's your day going? It's more than just like, yeah, can I get my coffee and swipe my card and like roll? It's like, no, like I see you. Like your job's important because your service industry is not easy, and I see you. So
I've always made a point of addressing people by their names, especially if they got a name tag on.
100%.
Address them by their name. They have a name. They're
That's
an
right.
individual. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that's what's lacking, it's lacking in society.
Yeah, I mean, I see that. I essentially been in social services in one shape or form. I got out of the military. And it's absolutely, like, you see so many people trying to abuse the system. They know a lot of people get burnt out and they're no longer individuals. And my thought is I rather help 10 people that don't really need it, as long as the 11th person does, than ignore the 10 people that don't need it and miss that 11th person that needs that help. They're all individuals. You know what I mean? Most of them are coming to us or are in some kind of pain. You know what I mean? And we're supposed to help them. Even just going into work, there's people that other people assume, well, they don't like anybody. Why do they like you? Because I say, hey, man, how you doing? Heard the husband's back from deployment. How's everything going? Everything good? You know what I mean? Is it excited to have him back? How was your birthday? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
stuff like that. And then they like me, and then now I have a better working
That's
environment. They'll send me to people. And it's like, that's not why I do this. I mean, it's a bonus of what I do, but people go through shit, man. I mean, you have to be a pretty brutal person for me to write you off. And I've maybe written 2 people off in the entirety of my life. I've helped people that have made my life a living hell when they needed help because, look, I don't know why they're doing it. We all grow up different, you know what I mean? Maybe your dad or mom was a dick, you know what I mean? And that's why you're kind of a dick now. And maybe an act of kindness will make you rethink some of the stuff you do.
When I worked at the hospital, part of my responsibility was teaching student interns, and we had we were one of the, if not the first cardiac rehabs in the United States. So the cardiac rehab and the sports med departments would feed our health and fitness center. So I would teach, we got these kids from Temple, we got these kids from state universities, and they would do their internships as they were finishing their degrees. And when a patient would come in, they had a chart. They'd put their chart on the desk, and you would take their blood pressure, you would review their meds, and that's how you got to know people. And I remembered names. I'd have the name on the chart, and if I saw them more than once, I knew their name, and I knew everything about them from looking at that chart. And I would teach the kids that I had that is somebody's parent, that is somebody's grandparent, and you want to treat them like you would want your parent or your grandparent to be treated. Because your parent or your grandparent is going to need help from somebody somewhere, either at a hospital or at wherever it is, and you want your parent to be treated with respect and dignity. Yeah. And I'm still huge on that, even here. I mean, you see it here. I'm huge on that.
Even like when I worked at the gym years ago, worked at the racket club, there was a guy who was just a curmudgeon, and he would come across mean and gruff, and people just didn't want to work with him. And I would talk to him, and he was mean and gruff with me at first, but I just kept talking and talking and talking. And people were like, how can you tolerate that? And I'm like, did you check his arm? I'm like, he has numbers on his arm. I'm like, he's a Holocaust survivor. Right. You know what I mean? Like, if anybody has a little bit of a reason to be a dick, it's him. But I said, if you give him time and you give him a little respect, you know what I mean? He's probably got what now we would classify as PTSD. So, and knowing the stuff that I know and with my friends and myself, it's your enemy or friend, depending how deep you're into that. If you give him time, he's not a bad guy. You know what I mean? He comes across rough. He's very direct. He comes from a different culture. He grew up most of his life in Eastern Europe, and so he came over here, and then he went through one of the most horrifying things ever. Like, if you're not paying attention to people, you don't realize it. Sometimes, most of the time, there's a reason for everybody's behavior. It doesn't mean it it allows them to get off for their, you know what I mean, behavior. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't learn how to control it, but we don't know what part of their journey that they're in. And you don't necessarily know what it's from. It might not even be you. So I've learned to try not to take things personal, especially if they don't know me, and just to try to break that outer icy shell, because you can, if with perseverance and kindness, you can get through it. And actually, like you said, really, truly caring about somebody. And Lee, as much as he bust my balls, he honestly, truly cared.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When I came in here, like, if I wasn't showing up, you know, like, go, what's going on? You know what I mean? Are you all right? How you doing? You know, like, and stuff like that counts. I have a bass teacher that when my wife was in the hospital called and said, hey, man. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm sorry. I was supposed to be there. No. How's she doing? Like, that stuff means a lot to me. Your daughter making lemon meringue for me on my birthday meant a lot to me. Like, and then I'm in your corner. You know, like little stuff like that, I will always be in your corner for the rest of my life because I return that kindness. Now, are you also thinking about doing a podcast too with the kids?
I am. You know, and before I talk about that, I learned there's a phrase I use. I call it showing up for people, and I don't use that phrase lightly. Like when I show up for people, like I'm all in. You know, we have a mentoring program at our school, and I have 2 kids I'm mentoring. One's a 6th grader, one's a 7th grader. The 7th grader I just took on, and he's having a hard time. And I've seen him, like he'll just tear up a class, and I'm like, why is he suffering so much? So, you know, I decided to mentor him, and we have this we call it a proud card, where each class he gets kind of graded, you know, with numbers. You know, was he crushing it? Was he kind of in the middle, or did he have a hard time? So at the end of the day, we talk about it, and I can tell, like, he's trying to feel me out. Like, he won't trust me yet. And I said, you don't trust me yet? He said, no. I'm like, that's fair. You know, just because I'm your teacher doesn't mean you don't know that I'm going to show up for you. So every day, it's like, he said something interesting. He's like, his interpretation of that proud card with the numbers on there, he's like, yeah, this is teacher snitching on me. I'm like, oh, okay, teachable moment. These aren't teachers snitching on you. This is what it means to be held accountable. Like, this is a life skill where, you know, we're accountable for our actions. And as you become an adult, adults who don't know what it means to be accountable, well, their life is really unmanageable. But when you hold yourself accountable, you can have a really successful life, and success could look different, you know, for everyone. So it's been learning from kids, right? So the podcast, it's been something that's been on my radar since I went to Mr. Jarrett's class with his. I think it's a great way to bring the outside community into a classroom that feels more organic than someone coming in and sharing a PowerPoint slide with my students. Like, that doesn't work. But the podcast format is going to be called Build2Learn. It is called Build2Learn because I wanted to connect it to what they're doing in the class. And it's still like present tense. I played around with the name for a little bit. I started off with like Built to Learn, but then it's more like past tense. But Build to Learn is more like progressive and now and to the future. And it's going to be student driven. I have three girls who said, yeah, I'll help you with this, and they'll be part of my, sound crew and ask the questions and whatnot. So in about a week, we're going to have our first guest. It's going to be our principal. And I'm strategic in having her be the first one because without her, this program wouldn't be there. But it's going to, bring people in from the building trades to come talk to the kids. And not necessarily building trades, but, one of the owners of Guys Bicycles, Bobby, he wants to come and talk to the kids. And it's just bringing as much exposure as possible to students.
That's awesome.
Like yourselves, come and talk to them. And that does not happen in schools that I know of, right? Even like trips now, to go on a trip on a school, it's limited where you can go. And so I'm just going around that hurdle and doing it this way and see what happens. And yeah.
I mean, I'm willing to help you with the setup too. And
cool. Definitely need help.
I can help you with any of that. You need me, just let me know. I tried to show Lee the soundboard, but he's a gorilla, so
yeah, no,
it's not happening.
You're the radio guy. That's all you, bro.
Yeah.
So
all right.
So we're at about an hour 5.
Yeah.
Are we good?
That's good, man.
Okay.
All
All right. Well, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks.
This is a
Thanks
pleasure,
for
man.
being with us.
Yeah,
Thanks.
appreciate you guys, man. Appreciate
Awesome.
everything.
Cool. Thank you.